So Alice, oh, it's lovely to see you again. You look really well, considering you've had a hell of a year or two. How long has it been from when you first gave me a call?
I think I Googled you. You were not a referral.
Oh, right.
And my husband went into the guest bedroom on the 1st of October 2017.
Wow.
Saying, I don't want to be married to you.
And then just leaving you to deal with it all. Which often happens.
He lost his job within 2 weeks of that. He lost his very well paid job and got paid a huge settlement, but again, just stayed in the guest bedroom. And then I was working at a local prep school, offsetting school fees. So I continued doing that, but no money was coming into the house at all. Yeah. And we both lived together, separated for 9 months till he got a job the following May. And then he still stayed until the August, because I think he just was just like in a sort of no man's land, you know, after 9 months of just existing together. I think he said something like, I could carry on doing this forever. What's the big deal?
And did you find, because I found this in my own personal experience and certainly seen it with others, that the reality of the separation, of not living in the same house anymore, often for the dads comes as quite they can't imagine it the way we can. They don't have the same level of dread. It's almost delusional, which is kind of lucky for them in a way. So it's less, they don't have all that ongoing fear. They've just
it's got a parallel with becoming a parent. The minute you're pregnant, a woman understands everything that they do changes, the restrictions come in, and you know, you're pregnant, you're growing a baby, whereas they sort of say a week before you're about to have the baby, what do you think it will be like? And do you think it will change anything? Hopefully not. And I think that there's that sense of women hit the ground running from the minute the problem strikes, and men sort of drop a bombshell and then move away from the broken glass and take a neutral position.
So you were in that unenviable position where you didn't even want the divorce in the first place, and yet you had to manage it all because otherwise nothing was going to happen, and you're in this sort of impossible status quo. And again, this is something I've come across quite often. How do you begin to deal with that situation? Because it's on the outside, it's like, well, obviously you just get on with it. But I remember when we first spoke that you were not the confident, sorted person. It is the most devastating thing when someone doesn't want to be with you anymore. There's no, and I've been there.
It's ruthless.
Yeah.
And I think meeting you was very informing because it's almost like your story was worse than mine. Yes. So that cheered me up.
I remember when I was first telling a friend after it just happened, and she said, "It's so awful. It's funny." Which was very un-PC of her, but it was.
And you seem like too nice a person for this to happen.
It's really good you say that, because I think people take it so seriously in the sense of they think it's to do. We automatically think it's to do with us, and it isn't actually. It really is nothing. Other people's decisions are nothing to do with us, and we just have to accept that.
It has to be something to do with you. But to answer your question, I think that the first thing one has to do, it's a bit like a car crash. I've got various analogies that will help people in the first stage understand the chaos. So number one is, I heard someone on your site talking about this car crash, and all of the glass comes in, and in a movie it goes woo, woo, woo. So there's that, and it lasts for months. All of the glass comes in, and you just sit there in a broken car wreck because no one else is going to do anything, in shock. So, there's the car crash analogy. There's the sort of falling, like Alice in Wonderland, down into a tunnel. And I just kept feeling like I was falling, but there was nothing to catch me. And that went on for probably a year. There was no bottom to this falling.
It's like a state of shock, and you can stay there for a very long time. When I say it's nothing to do, yes, we go through this process where we take on the responsibility and we take control, but there's that bit, I think it's really important right at the beginning to understand that we're not so omnipotent that we have this control over somebody else's life. If they decide to get depressed, run off with someone else, change their mind, that isn't under our control. It's not, and it's not because we've done something wrong. And unfortunately, you do feel like you have. And the society encourages you to think, well, what's wrong with your marriage or your relationship? And it's actually nothing. You haven't done anything wrong. It's just shit happens. And that's, I think that's a very important thing to recognize, because you end up with all this guilt which is really not helpful.
I had tons of guilt. I thought the analogy for the guilt was the rubble. I used to look around at all these lumps and bumps of, things I could probably make something out of as a fixer, as most women are. I wasn't allowed to choose all of Matt's choices, but the rubble that was left, that was my choice. What am I going to do with these little bits and pieces? I live on an estate here, and all the houses were finished in 1915. And all of the front boundary fences have these black sort of volcanic rocks and bits of broken brick. And obviously it's from the war, and bits and pieces people just made do. And it's kind of like that. You sort of think, well, that's a nice little remnant, I'll keep that. And there's a nice bit of rubble if I put with that, and that fits together. And that's the beginning of the rebuilding. I don't know when that starts happening. It might not be for months if you're being kind to yourself, but you begin to see the rubble and think, there's a bit of promise in this rubble.
But equally, I found that I also had things that it took me a long time to get rid of the bed and the rug and things that were very tied to not just the relationship, but the trauma around it. And yet I kept them for years.
But do you have to get a new bed? I'm in the same bed. I wear my wedding ring and people say, oh, so you're not really over him. And I said to my big sister, who's very wise, I said, what do I do about like the jewelry he gave me and the nice things? She said, Alice, there's no rule book. You do what you fucking want.
There's a lovely...
And I was like, yeah. I mean, I wear this ring because I love it, because I made a bunch of promises that I kept, and that I believe someone else will come along who wants to be with this ring and this person. And if you like it, it's a positive.
And if you like wearing it as a ring, that's fine. It's excellent. However, if you did want to, there's an amazing Italian jeweler I know who, what she did was she took her own her engagement ring, wedding, made other beautiful jewelry from it. So she used it. She didn't put it in a drawer and forget about it. And
but it's still a
very healing to do that.
It is, but I don't need to rearrange it, because to me that represents a happiness in my life and a great moment in my life and a commitment that it's all quite happy, that ring. Why does it have to go in a box just because my husband lives down the road and has bought a 3-bed flat? Those are the things that you can take your time about, whether it's the bed or the rug or a wedding ring. You choose.
And it does take time, and it's not something you should just suddenly get rid of. You just suddenly realize, why am I still attached to that? And that's a good process to go through. Or so why don't I change that into something else? Or actually it's fine as it is, because it, like you said, as long as it brings happy memories, then it's good. And it's like looking at your children. You don't look at your kids and go, oh my God,
I'm going to remodel them with an Italian jeweler. You're left with so much stuff you can't change. That there are times where I couldn't wear this wedding ring because it's too painful, but equally now I've framed it how I perceive that, and people find it unusual, but then that's the beauty of it, is you can be unusual.
And I think that, again, one of the things I love talking to you is it reminds me how it's all right to just go to take those decisions and to really, I don't know if, did you find that going through the whole process, long and painful though it is, that you began to realize that you have a lot more power than you realize about your choices, and you realize how sort of squashed you've allowed yourself to be in life, which I think happens to a lot of women with children and fathers as well, working themselves to death. It happens to all of us, but it's something like the trauma of family separation that does have some bright sides, because it does help you, gives you that opportunity to find yourself. I think you were saying earlier to me, weren't you, that you really know yourself now?
Yeah. And I think you can't rush that. I found a lot of people telling me, oh, well, he was never really around, so that was, preparation for where you are now. You're the sort of person who'll just get on with it. You're the sort of person that always comes out right side up. I found all that deeply annoying in my grief and in my journey. And I refused to believe it, because I was still in the wallowing pit of grief and shock and anger. And still now people tell me how I'm supposed to be about things. But you're right. I think, as much as I hate to say it, one of my very good best friends said, Alice, when this divorce eventually happens, you'll be financially better off, emotionally better off, and therefore physically better off, because you're carrying this stress that's got to go somewhere. You're going to be better off in every way. Well, if I could have punched her clean out right there in the bar, I would have done, because she's happily married. What would she know?
Yeah.
But actually, in this very long journey, and if you're patient enough, and if I don't come across as cheesy, yes, there's a whole new person that cracks out of that egg at some point, hopefully, for a lot of people. But I also think you have to live with some brokenness, some scars, some baggage, whatever, you know, like I am a better off person, and I now stand my own ground, know my own mind as if I didn't before, but even more so because it's tested me in every single way and made me the strong, proud, capable woman that I am now. Yeah. And hopefully someone else will pick that off the shelf and say, wow.
And I have no doubt they will, as long as you give them enough time to go to meet you. So what?
If they're on the same journey, right?
So with when that's such a big difference from when I first spoke to you. So what do you think for people who are still in the shock stage or still thinking, I cannot imagine the future and are heartbroken and gutted? What are the key, apart from looking after themselves and not listening to advice from people who tell them it's all going to be fine later on, what tangible things did you do that made a positive difference to you at that time?
Keep some hope. So my dad, who's incredible, used to say to me, keep a green bough in your heart and the singing bird will come.
Beautiful.
Hope. Some sort of hope. Because if you listen to the dark voices and you curl up in a ball and you tell yourself you're rubbish, it's kind of, how long do you want to sit there? It's not pleasant. So I got my dad to text me every bedtime at 9 every night for the last 3 years. He says, hello, dear. Kind of knows what I've done today, but says, you know, hope X, Y, and Z went well. Love you dearly. Good night. And I've said, please keep it brief, Dad. I just want to know someone's thinking of me at bedtime. And that was a really powerful thing that I asked for, and a powerful thing that he delivered to stop me being a man hater and all the other stuff I could have become.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think it's about what you need, and that's a really personal thing. I can't answer that, but I think it's picking yourself off the floor. You know, a lot of times I've seen, even on the divorce workshops, women and men broken and sobbing. It's like the bully in the playground. How many times are you going to get beaten up by the bully in the playground? And so you pick your fist up, gather yourself, pull up your big girl pants and say, enough is enough. So, you know, for me, that took me a really long time because I didn't want to be divorced and I didn't want my best friend in the world to leave me.
Because you have the acceptance stage until you can't move forward until you've done some acceptance, and that's really hard when you haven't chosen that situation. Did you, because I know that at one point you talked to a coach, you did seek different, I know you were exploring, which I always think's a brilliant thing to do.
Very important.
What was your experience of that, and how useful was it in helping you deal with the acceptance and preparing to take really control, which you very much did. You took very much control of the whole situation.
I think the number one thing I'd say is to take baby steps. So, you know, meeting you was probably a door that opened. Then you gave me books, DVDs, access to the internet, 101 different tools. And I used those as and when I needed the tools. And I realized that it wasn't just about the money and it wasn't just about the kids. It was about me. It was about my past. It is about my future. There's a whole bunch of things to deal with. So some of the people I met on your divorce retreat was very handy because you want to go through an experience with other people who were going through that, because it makes you feel like you've not got three heads. Yeah. So for me, it was a mixture of reading, of watching videos on YouTube, of taking advice from you, very specific advice. I just go, Susie, when are you free? Guide me on this, guide me on that. And a lot of it was just becoming an expert on divorce for me, whatever that means, because until you feel empowered, until you've got enough information, until you've got enough specialist people, until you've got enough time to think, you know, all of that comes together as a sort of project, really, and you take the reins of it and use the bits you need that are professional help. But the other 80% of it is coming from you and the information you've gathered, the decisions you make, and your own personal context of where you live, where your family is, where your children are, what age they are, the logistics.
You really took hold of the practicalities magnificently. You're very organised. And do you think that helped you by getting into the sort of the practical nitty gritty of having to focus on that? Because that is hard to do when you're in an very emotional situation.
Yes. So again, it comes back to the choices, being utterly rejected by my husband. And after being told for years I was rubbish at things, it made me really seriously angry. And at the same time as I had 4 large lever arch binder folders for my divorce, I printed everything, I reread everything, I took copies, I got the highlighter pen out, I called you if I didn't understand. That became 4 binder folders. And I also took a maths GCSE in 17 weeks. And I got 3 Ds when I was 17. So I used all of that anger to tackle these nemesises that say Alice isn't very good, and did the rebuild. Because they're both framed by where I do my washing up, which is where I spend a lot of my time as a mum. I've got a maths GCSE, grade 5, and I've got another certificate, which is my teacher training, postgraduate teacher training, English, maths, geography, science. Whoa, it was a complete brain fry. So I had that and the divorce. And when my husband collected the children for the weekend, he'd say, oh, well, what are you getting up to? And I was like, not a lot. And I would hit at every one of these projects 110% because I was just so angry, lost, that I needed the certificates to let people know I'm capable. And no one's allowed to ever challenge that. I am intelligent. I am capable. And then the divorce was just a nasty nettle that had to be done, and done rightly by everybody.
You very much what I call self-managed your divorce. Recently, a journalist was interviewing me about was it DIY divorce, and I said to her, look, DIY divorce tends to mean just doing the admin bit online. Anyone can do that, but that's not the same as if you've got finances and stuff. Staying out of court and sell as much as you can and self-managing, that's what I call DIY, and you can't do it all on your own. So, but actually it does keep the cost down. So I was talking to someone, a couple of people recently have spent well over £500,000 on their divorces, just to sort out the financial aspects, which they're not happy about, but that's how it ended up for them. You certainly managed to avoid that completely. Do you think that what helped you to make sure you didn't fall into that trap of just wasting ridiculous amounts of money, especially when you were so angry and upset early on, because you could easily have been a victim of that?
I think Matt and I are both self-made, state-educated, normal people. And the idea of giving hard-earned cash away on either side was not very palatable. But even above that for me, which I never really discussed with Matt, was the lack of control of something so important to me. How can another person, whether they're on £250 an hour or £575 an hour plus VAT, know what I need in 2 years' time, 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 15 years' time out of this wreckage? And they work from 9 till 6 and they clock off. It's really hard to get someone else to do your dirty work. And I just felt that as someone who was intelligent, as someone who contributed to this mess, as someone who had 2 dependent, beautiful boys wondering what the hell was going on with our lives, that I was in the best place to try to sort this for all of us and be the adult. So it was a mixture of logic, a mixture of money saving, and a mixture of morality. I think that these lawyers in particular have huge power, and with COVID and the delays that are going through the courts, children aren't seeing their dad for 6 to 9 months because they're waiting for the first court hearing. That can't be okay. So I came to one of your retreats and I gave a guy a lift home, the guy that's Fathers for Justice.
Families Need Fathers.
Families Need Fathers.
Great charity.
And I just thought, wow, that's such an important cause. Even though what was happening to me, 2 boys need their dad. So again, there's a lot of cost to the legal process, but a huge amount of delays. And for mine to take 3 years, and 2 years is probably an average, with COVID, things are taking double, and you're just not getting any closure, any answers, anything done. And just dangling is the worst feeling ever.
So how did you know, some people think, oh, 3 years, how did it, you know, without going to court and turning it into big battles? Explain to people why, just because you're self-managing your divorce, which is always going to be the best option because you are more in control, and it can save you hundreds of thousands of pounds, why that's not necessarily a fluffy, easy option.
It's not a fluffy, easy option, and it's not a fast option. I think it is faster than if we'd gone through the courts, we'd still be waiting now. I mean, the delays are disgusting, and people aren't being told that. I think because we had to frame what we did around a bunch of logistics. So, you know, Matt lived here for 9 months with no job. I was here retraining for 9 months with no job. He then moved out and lived in a friend's house rather than having a formal tenancy agreement for about 6 to 9 months. And then he bought a 3-bedroom flat just a mile away and 1 tube stop away. And it was only then that he would engage with Form E's and disclosure properly, because he then knew what he'd spent on new furniture, a new place, stamp duty. So if you like, all that had to come out of our money pot before we then did the split. So it was to his advantage. But at the same time, you know, I didn't want to settle until I'd had full disclosure. And our younger son finished private primary school, and they're both in state secondary school. So there's these huge sort of tectonic plates that mean none of us can see what we need next until that chapter's fully closed. So I would say in September this year, when Jamie, my second son, started at a state secondary, our costs went down massively. The divorce was nearly through. I'd got a full-time job. You know, all of those things had happened that meant we were all much more stable to sign on the dotted line on a financial consent order, which you have to have in order for the judge to stamp your decree absolute. So there's all these steps in the background, but they have to fall in line with how quickly you can make all these changes in reality. And they're big changes to go through. They don't just happen overnight.
So instead of rushing him and using the courts, which you can do, use the courts to chase someone up and get them to fill in their Form E and get them to move things forwards, you played it very well, really. I know it took longer, but you managed not just the practical side of the divorce, but you managed your relationship. That must have been hard to do.
Super hard. But super hard. The hardest thing is to still build bridges and still do family things together. So we spent Christmas Day and Boxing Day together because of COVID-19. None of us could leave London. Our families were both doing great things in different parts of the UK, not under Tier 4. And we came together for those 2 days. So it's very hard. But what's the alternative to live with swords crossed, saying horrible things about each other? You're going to have to dig deep, whether you're married, separated, divorced. I don't think it ever stops. I just try to be the best person, the most generous person I can be in a situation. And there are times where I can say, do you know what? I can't do tonight. That is too much. So it's finding the boundaries that you can deal with. But the benefit of just getting on with people in my life is 10 times better than fighting and carrying that piss and vinegar around all the time. Is exhausting.
And do you think what ways have having children helped you, as you said, pull your big girl pants up and just be such a grown up about the whole thing and manage it?
You can't walk away. I mean, there were times, so many times, that I've loved to just walk away. You know, Matt's not the only person I've ever been with. Every partnership I've ever had, I've been able to walk away when they finish with me or I finish with them. But when you have children and you're 45 years old and everybody in the neighborhood's watching and leaving flowers on your doorstep, it's very public, it's very real, and there was no walking away. So I don't think I had a choice on that, because I know what I do today affects tomorrow, and I know what I do tomorrow affects next week. And I want my children to see the example of choosing peace, choosing bridges, and seeing the best in someone who I married. You know, I picked that person to spend the rest of my life with. The fact that he chose to up and out one day and to mean it, first of all, I thought he was joking, to be honest, but to mean it, I've absorbed that for them. And I'm proud of that.
Yeah, and you should be. And I think what you've said there is so key, is when you look at the children, they are the ones that they haven't chosen this situation. I always say that, your kids, what they want is mummy and daddy to be happy. And ultimately, they don't really mind too much which house you live in. I mean, obviously, they quite like it if you're in the same house, but as long as you're both happy and they don't have any guilt, because they so easily pick up that guilt, then job's done on that. But that's, as you described, is quite a process to make that happen in itself. But I think they are the real blessing, really, because otherwise you can just leave a relationship, off you go, and you don't learn anything, you don't grow from it. And I think there is so much to learn. What do you think you've learned most from from the suffering, from the experience? Because it's, whether
I
we
think it is
suffer or not.
suffering. You can use that word.
Yeah, it can be. So I am also conscious that we choose how we react. But yes, when something hurts, it hurts. And but it's how do you feel that that's changed you? What have you learned? What have you gained from all of that? Was it worth it?
Yes. But it's a bit like the Brexit deal. It's a 51-49% win. As I said, that my friend said, you'll be better off this way, that way, and the other way eventually. I think that that's true, because staying in a relationship with somebody who doesn't want to be with you is A, depressing, and B, lonely. But you kind of hope that they see the light and go, oh, I've been depressed, or I've been drinking too much. Oh, let's make a go of it. But that's never happened. So what I've taken from that is more responsibility for my life. Battle scarred or not, the first act of my life, 45, is over. And the second act, after a slightly warm gin and tonic, is all mine for the taking. Yeah. So yes, I'd love to sit here and say in 5 or 10 years' time, all these magical things have happened for me because I was freed from something that wasn't working.
I have to say, I have the same thing. I literally still do get that feeling when I see the kids' dad. Partly I was thinking, it's amazing how we were together for 10 years because we're so different, and it does seem bizarre, but I think we both have changed a lot as well since we broke up. But the other thing I think is I actually want to hug him, which I don't, because it would seem weird to say thank you, because although it was so traumatic, I wouldn't change anything. But that's easy for me to say because I'm that much further along, shall we say. But I'm really glad that you can already say yes, because it's still early days, really, and that's an amazing achievement. And looking forward
before we go, I've got a tarot card that if anybody feels awful, they should look at this card. Yeah. It's called the Ten of Swords. And Google it. There's a person lying on the floor. They have 10 swords in their back. They are down and out, and they are going nowhere. And very often I felt like the 10 of Swords in a tarot card. Yeah. And most weirdy people that do tarot will say to you, but look, there's a dawn, a bright yellow white dawn, and he's looking to the dawn. Ooh. And I just think, what a powerful card, because if there was ever a card to sum up the lows and the possible high that we're talking about, the possible tomorrow, that is the card. And when I felt very sad, I would look at it, and it really did give me that hope.
That's beautiful. I will look it up. And before you go, can you and it's very generous of you to give up a little bit of your New Year's Eve to share this, because this is
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So would you, in sort of on a pragmatic basis, we talked about, you've got you in shock in the beginning. It's really important to get to support yourself, to look after yourself, to get to focus on, take responsibility, focus on the nitty gritty. But for those who are frightened of getting drawn into the whole legal battles thing, on a very practical basis, how do you avoid just handing it all over to the lawyers? Because there must have been times when you felt like doing that.
I literally Googled 5 mediators that work locally and gave Matt those numbers. And they were called Eunice. One was called Alice, which is my name. He was like, that's a no. And I waited for him to pick the one man mediator. And sure enough, he said, David Harding. Yes, I think that's the man for me. And so therefore, it is good to consult and to do your research. And in a divorce, be one step ahead of your spouse every time, because I knew how this was going to go. Man to man, they would tell me how things were going to go. But guess what? David Harding was a very experienced, very capable, very fair man who carved out half of what I've kept in the first session. And Matt's mouth dropped, but he was willing to hear it from him.
Yeah.
So number one, do your research and make sure you get the right mediator. And like marriage counselling, if the first one's not right, go to the second one. If the second one's not right, go to the third one, because you will save so much time and money. We probably had 8 mediation sessions at £550 a go with this guy, but we had the format for what our divorce looked like from those 8 sessions, which was then turned into the consent order with more expensive lawyers. But the foundation, the grunt work was all done there between Matt and myself, which again is what I'm saying about keeping the control of where we're going in a safe space.
And that's with someone who was very reticent. It wasn't rushing to get it all sorted. So I mean, if some people they could do it in less than 8. So, but the fact that you were able to do it at all that way was fabulous, actually.
And if you can find someone who's not even a mediator, so talking to Kirsty Cox, she said that she's been advising on finance, but actually helping a couple who are quite amicable on other practical things because they're having sessions together. So I used my dad as a mediator because Matt really respects my dad. He's a lot like David Harding. He's very calm, very patient, very measured. And we ended up in this cycle where the mediation would fix 5 or 6 big questions and leave us with 2. And like a washing machine, we were going round and round at £550 a session, not able to finish things off. So be resourceful, be willing to shift, be willing to get help from you or anybody who can be a slightly independent person and finish off those straggles, because the straggles are the killers. They're the stumbling blocks.
And for a lot of people with the financial aspects, I do find, because Henry Ellison does quite a lot with the people that I refer now as well, like Kirsty, he's a financial planner doing the long-term cash flow forecasting. And he's actually had people where he's called me up and said, well, they've agreed. So what do we do now? And he didn't even need to do the mediation because it was so obvious what the best way was, because they were looking into the future. They could see, there's no point keeping the house if you can't afford to run it, and all those extra numbers, because he can do all the spreadsheets and look into the future. And I think that's the key thing, isn't it? It's not going, how do we break something up and hang on to things, is how much, if I keep the house, what's happens in 5 years' time? What happens in 10 years' time if I'm only going to earn X? And you need to really do the numbers. And the more you do that, then the quicker the mediations are. And actually, someone like Henry and Kirsty as well can go into that mediation and be there so you're not going away to get information. They're literally there to ask. But it all comes down to the couple agreeing to work together in that way. But
we got to
both of the advantage.
We did the mediation with David Harding. We did the mediation with my dad. He had a collaborative lawyer. I had a collaborative lawyer. More work with my dad. And then I was in a lay-by with him not very long ago, saying, because of X, Y, and Z, this final figure needs adjusting by X, Y, and Z. In a lay-by, labouring my point. He's like, you're killing me. I said, not really. I'm not going to settle on something that's unfair. Ooh, I'm not going to tell you what he said to me. But, it is slowly cooks the chicken. It is all these tiny little steps and braveries that get you to the final destination, like the Monopoly board. You think there can't be another square. I can't land on Park Lane. Where's the get out of jail free card? It is just relentless. But all those little steps add up to an outcome in the end. A Brexit, a signed deal.
And it's your future, and your children. So it's not something you're going to skimp on. It's not something that should be rushed. Do you feel that the more with all that additional information you had from your dad and other advice that made you know that you needed to make an adjustment, gave you the confidence to do that? Because I think a lot of the
line of communication open. I think in all marriage breakdowns, there's a huge amount of resentment, huge amount of hurt. In many cases, game playing, silence, ghosting. I didn't know what ghosting was until I actually Googled it after what had happened with Matt. There's so much going on that level that if someone can just keep the communication open, that's the key. Someone can keep the dung ball of divorce rolling. That's the key. because if it's rolling forward, even by very small amounts, it's got some momentum to it. And testament to Matt and to me, even if we didn't really like each other a lot of the time, we moved that dung ball along.
Yeah, he did what was needed to be done, and of course he's benefited from it, because it would not have helped him to spend thousands that he didn't need to spend. And I think that it's what you said, absolutely right, with the communication side, because the minute you've got an illegal letter coming in that you're trying to read, it's always going to piss you off the way it's written, because it has to be written in a certain way, then you really haven't got proper communication anymore. And then you've got a solicitor telling you not to talk to the other person and only do it. So that's when it really starts to fall apart, I think, for a lot of people. And if they're hurt, then they sometimes don't mind that at the time. They think, oh, good, that it's all going to happen that way, and they think it's a benefit. Nope. It's not.
No, mudslinging is mudslinging, and the whole bully in the playground, 2 bullies don't make it right. So the let peace be your weapon of choice was a very powerful message that you gave me. It's a pragmatic message, because it's not just for today or next week, it's for life. You know, I want to be 90 and say I did my best at that really tricky time and rest easy in my armchair. And that's the peace of mind you get from doing the digging deep and doing things properly by everybody.
And that's what most people want in life, really, is peace of mind. And the other one I like is that peace is not fluffy. And just again, to finish off, while I've got you here, I'm more and more I'm hearing people saying, well, I managed to keep out of court. This is from both men and women, and they're exhausted by the process. And I feel it's really important I get so cross when people say, oh, you help people have a happy divorce. I'm like, no, divorce is not happy. The peaceful route is tough. Ultimately, it's a lot less stressful than being dragged through the courts and spending thousands of pounds you don't need to, but it's not easy. And to tell anyone it is a lie. So, I mean, is there a way to describe, because you put these things so beautifully, how peace isn't fluffy, because you managed to achieve that beautifully throughout?
Yes. So when this first happened, I sat all of us down and lit a candle, and we held hands to tell our children that we were no longer going to live under the same roof, that Daddy would move out and things would change, and we all 4 cried, holding hands. That's how I wanted to tell them. It was weird. I don't know how you do tell children. In books, they give you a 10-step guide. I did it my way. This Christmas, I couldn't spend 2 hours in a room with Matt, but with Tier 4, I had to choose the best possible Christmas for me, my children, and for him. So I went round to his house and I said, you and I don't get along. We're going to need to dig really deep to spend Christmas Day, which is full of triggers, together. And I think I likened you to the sort of the spear and the shield. For me, you need to hit each issue straight on with the spear and then hold up the deflection shield for what comes next. That's peace, because it's being heard, it's being intrinsic, it's being true, it's being honest, it's being the bigger person to make other nice things happen for you, your family, and your soon-to-be ex-spouse. So yeah, it's messy and it's difficult. Peace is not pretty always, but I can honestly say that we all came to that Christmas Day and had a lovely day, because I'd set some boundaries, some possible tripwires before him, and included myself. I said, I'm going to dig deep. I'm asking you to dig deep. And if I annoy you, step outside of the room for 5 minutes, come back. Can you do that?
Brilliant. And it takes so much courage. I think I hate get cross with people, their idea of peace is that you're some sort of doormat and it's all about compromise, and they mix that up with mediation. It's not. Good mediation, good dealing with family situations is, as you said, boundaries. It's being grown up, it's being strong. It takes courage and guts, actually, to do it well. And I'm really keen to get that message out, because that's why it feels so great when you make it work, even though you're still a bit bruised and exhausted.
So I would say peace is not fluffy,
right thing, and it's ultimately is the right thing for you and for your children.
I've got the analogy: peace is the perfect 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle, because it isn't easy, and even if you've done the edge pieces, it takes ages to fill in the middle. That's peace. When you put the last piece of that jigsaw puzzle piece in, the 1,000 bits of peaceful action you've taken create that. And it's something to be proud of.
It is. And it's the best, it is the best gift you could ever give your children, ever, ever, ever. That you haven't just managed to scrape your way through it and have a stiff upper lip. You've actually made it work. And it is something that's, but I'm so proud of you. Thank you for
Thank you for helping me do my peaceful jigsaw. And it's a gift to yourself, you know, it is a sense of achievement at the end. And no one knows when the end is. It takes forever. But eventually it is the end.
And I think it will enhance and improve and enlighten every other relationship you have, of all types of relationships as well.
I hope so.
So lovely to see you, Alice. Have a wonderful, wonderful new year.
Happy 2021.
And as soon as we're allowed, let's go for a walk together. Or even better, well, I've got a hip flask. We don't have to wait till the pub's open. Have a lovely time.
Lovely to see you. Take care.